This is the Seth Mila Program.
Let's start today by taking a little bit of a mental journey. Imagine, if you will, trying to explain to somebody from about 100 years ago that in your pocket, you carry a device more powerful than the computers that sent astronauts to the moon. First of all, they're going to go, we went to the moon? Of course, you're going to say, well, yeah, but that's not my point. Hang on. You have in your pocket a device that lets you talk to almost anyone on Earth, instantly answers nearly any question, guide you wherever you want to go, and can even help doctors save lives. We've witnessed some really amazing technological advances in our human history, but here's the question I have for today. Technology is making our lives better, right? I have always been fascinated by technology. And I'm not the first guy to run out and buy every new gadget that comes along, probably because I can't afford it. Anyway, but I will admit every now and then Apple does manage to convince me that I absolutely need something I somehow survived for years without. I'm not going to talk about how much time I spent fussing over whether or not to buy an Apple Watch. I didn't need it, but yeah, it sits in my watch box. That's another conversation for later. Anyway, what really fascinates me is how quickly our world has changed. If you're around my age, you've seen it happen. We grew up with rotary telephones attached to the kitchen wall. We had black and white TVs, paper road maps that were folded up so many times you could never fold them back again. And if you're still using that, what are you, a pirate? I mean, what? We had film cameras where you had no idea whether your vacation pictures turned out until about a week later. When I was very young, I had a chance to go to Italy, and I took, 100, 200 pictures with a little camera. And yeah, when I got them back, they were all terrible. None of them survived, maybe a handful. It was heartbreaking. Anyway, most of us carry around a smartphone that's connected to satellites orbiting about 22,000 miles above the Earth, and it can give us turn-by-turn directions, let us video chat with someone on the other side of the planet. It'll translate foreign languages in real time and can really answer just about any question that we ask it. We don't even have to stop and think about it anymore. We've become rather accustomed to the miracles. And you know what? They no longer seem like they're miracles. They don't seem fascinating anymore. It's kind of blasé. So in this show, in this time that we have together, I want to do something a little different. Instead of talking about the latest gadget or the newest AI announcement, there's enough of that. I want to step back and I want to ask a much bigger question. Is technology actually making our lives better? Now, it's not nearly as simple of a question as it may sound, but the answer might actually be yes and no. 100 years ago really wasn't that long ago. It sounds like ancient history until you realize there's an awful lot of us that had grandparents who were alive in 1925. Somewhere in that time frame, I think that's where my grandparents, very young at age, came from their home country to the United States. And think about what it looked like when they got here, okay? World War I recently had just ended. Commercial radio was exploding in popularity. Automobiles were finally becoming common enough that ordinary families pretty much could own one. Airplanes were still considered amazing. Electricity was spreading from city to city. People genuinely believed that they were entering a brand new age. And just like we do today, they loved making predictions about the future. Newspapers did it. Scientists did it. Everybody seemed to want to get in on it. And everybody wanted to know or make some kind of prediction. What's life going to be like 100 years from now? Okay. Let's take a look. Now, some of those predictions were, okay, let's just say they missed the mark, okay? And it's like, no. For example, one popular predictions suggested that our houses would be cleaned all by themselves. And no, not with robotic vacuum cleaners. No. The suggestion was high-pressure water hoses would be built into every room. So when you left the house, the walls would literally spray everything down. Then giant fans would begin to dry the house in a couple of hours. I can't even imagine. I get wigged out when I spill something or I leave like a little bit of a watermark on the countertop. I cannot imagine what it would have been like to have your house completely hosed down. Another prediction claimed that we're all going to be wearing identical clothing. Now, I think this was something that was perpetuated in a lot of sci-fi movies. We're all supposed to be wearing singlets and, jumpsuits or whatever. Some experts even predicted that weather would be completely controlled. Okay, I know some of you out there are going, hey, can we talk about that for a minute? No. This is not where we're going to jump into other conspiracy theories. Let's just suffice it to say we are not, on the whole, controlling our weather. It's just not happening. Some other people believe that eventually we would build underwater cities. I used to kind of think that living underwater would be kind of cool. I mean, think about, and I know there's hotels that do this, where you can get a room that is submerged underwater and you're sleeping like in a giant, in front of a giant aquarium. I think that would be wonderful. Okay, so those are some of the predictions that didn't quite hit it. Some predictions, however, kind of came close. Flying cars. Oh my goodness, we've been talking about flying cars for I don't know how long, and we're not there. There's a few companies that are developing, and they talk about how they have developed electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. But it's not there, right? It's not where you can go out and go, should I replace the car that's in my driveway with a flying car? No, it's just not there. Another prediction that it's in the ballpark, is that robots would do all of our chores. The original thought we would have robots that would take care of everything, the menial chores, and even childcare, which in 1925 is saying that a robot would do childcare kind of said a lot about the attitude toward children at that time. Oh, Margaret, we don't need to actually pay attention to the child and give it affection and talk to it. Just let the robot do it. It'll be fine. What's the worst that could happen? Okay, so we don't have that going on. But we do have some robotic lawnmowers. And we do have vacuum cleaners that you can just let loose around your house, and it'll kind of scan the floor and map it out and clean whenever it's convenient for you. Artificial intelligence is beginning to organize our schedules and answer questions and even write computer code. And so we're getting closer to robots doing some of the menial tasks for us. I'm still waiting for somebody to invent a robot that does fitted sheets correctly. If anybody does that, they're going to make Elon Musk's wealth look like a pittance. One other prediction, however, comes really, really close, and that's in the field of medical science. People in 1925 believed that disease would largely become a thing of the past. And obviously, that's not completely true. We still battle cancer. There's still a major fight against heart disease and Alzheimer's, and new viruses are popping up. Obviously, medicine continues to face enormous challenges. But let's stop for a second and appreciate how far we've actually come. Smallpox, eradicated. Think about that. It's a disease that killed hundreds of millions of people. Gone. Hepatitis C, today more than 95% of patients can be cured. Many childhood leukemias, once almost always fatal, now have survival rates above 90%. And you've got organ transplants and medical tests like MRIs and CT scans. There's precision cancer therapies and all of this. And don't even get me started on artificial joints. For crying out loud, you can have a shoulder completely replaced in outpatient surgery. You go in the morning, you get your shoulder redone, and out you go acting like Steve Austin. If you had explained modern medicine to someone living 100 years ago, they probably would think you're describing magic. And then there's space travel. People imagined we'd be taking vacations on the moon by now. Okay, so don't pack your bags for lunar resorts just yet. But you do know that we are very seriously about going back to the moon, the Artemis projects, and more. It's going to happen. Permanent bases, sending people to Mars is something that is definitely in the plans, and it's remarkable. If you think if someone from 1925 walked into my studio here, right? I'm pretty sure, yes, they'd be fascinated by the computers and all the other stuff that I've got going on the TV and so forth. But I think they would actually be amazed by our society as a whole, how casually we use technology that would have completely changed their understanding of reality. Because for us, it's Tuesday. So let me ask you something. What's the single biggest technological change you have witnessed in your lifetime? I think for me, it would be personal computers and, the internet, right? I mean, that's kind of where everything jumped off, but maybe it's for you, it's, I don't know, GPS, streaming your favorite show on TV whenever you want to, not having to pay attention to the TV guide and being in front of the TV at a specific time. I guess depending on your answer, it says probably a lot about your generation. Now, all of that, I have to admit, raises one other question. How did we get here? How did civilization go from horse-drawn wagons to incredibly intelligent smartphones in, 100 years? The answer, I think, might be a little simplistic, might even surprise you. But in my opinion, it all starts with something most of us stopped thinking about years ago: electricity. Obviously, electricity has always existed. Nobody invented electricity. Well, okay, God did. Lightning has been giving us wonderful shows in the sky since the beginning of creation. Static electricity has always been there too. If you've ever shuffled across the carpet, in your socks and you touched a loved one, boom, you've performed a science experiment in static electricity. The question wasn't whether or not electricity existed. The question was, could we understand it? And perhaps more importantly, could we harness it? We all know about Ben Franklin flying a kite during the thunderstorm. By the way, I wouldn't suggest doing that. Franklin experimented and became one of the most famous stories in American history, but what often gets overlooked is what came afterwards. Franklin helped transform electricity from something mysterious into something scientists could actually begin studying. He coined some terms that are still in use today: positive, negative, as far as charges are concerned, battery, conductor. These are all terms that he coined. Imagine creating words that people are still trying to use 300 years later. It's a pretty good legacy. But Franklin actually was only the beginning. Italian scientist Alessandro Volta developed the first practical battery. Michael Faraday discovered electromagnetic induction, making electric generators possible. James Clerk Maxwell mathematically explained how electricity and magnetism work together. Then came two names pretty much everybody recognizes: Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla. And if you spent any time on the internet, you've probably discovered people tend to divide into whether they're Team Edison or Team Tesla. Personally, I'm pretty much thankful all of these individuals existed. Competition often pushes innovation forward. Edison helped create practical electric lighting. Tesla developed the alternating current electrical system that powers much of the modern world. And listen, whether you realize it or not, their work affects your life every single day. Every time you flip on a light switch, you plug in the coffee maker. Oh, coffee. My brain went on a little bit of a vacation. Every time you charge your phone, every time you turn on the TV, you're benefiting from some the discoveries that were made a century ago. It's remarkable when you stop and think about it. Have you ever wondered what invention has impacted your life the most? I mean, most people would answer, "Oh, it's my smartphone," or the internet. Like I said just a little while ago, there might actually be an invention that's more important than that, and you may have never even thought about it. Yet every electronic device you own and use currently, right now, is critically dependent on it: the transistor. In 1947, 3 researchers at Bell Laboratories invented something about the size of your fingernail. Didn't look very impressive. There were no flashing lights. There's no touch screen, no AI, just a very tiny electric switch. But that tiny switch completely changed human history. Without that transistor, there are no personal computers. There's no smartphones, meaning no GPS, no internet, no digital cameras, no satellites. You get the point. No modern medical equipment, nothing. Before the transistor, electronics depended on vacuum tubes. And if you've ever seen one, it's okay. Picture a glass light bulb, right? Now imagine building a computer using thousands of these things. They were enormous. That's why when they talk about the first computers, they were just these giant rooms filled with electronic equipment. And as you can imagine, they failed often. They consumed huge amounts of electricity. And that's one of the reasons early computers just were impractical. When they started thinking, hey, I'm going to give you a personal computer, it's like, hey, I don't have that much storage space. The computer in your pocket is millions of times more powerful than anything that was built in the day. And it fits, pretty much right there in your pocket. My dad actually repaired TVs for a while. At least these are the stories he told me. I remember him telling me about working on some of these old vacuum tube TVs before he could even reach inside and replace whatever had gone bad. He said he would take a very large screwdriver and touch it to the internal workings of the TV, and there would be a huge electrical arc, and not just a quick snap, but an arc of electricity that would last. It would deliberately discharge all the stored electricity. Otherwise, he probably would have received quite a nasty shock, maybe even injured. The old televisions weren't something you can casually turn on either. And you couldn't just open them up and get in there. Some of you listening probably remember to that. Maybe even had one. Mine was black and white, and I think it was a Curtis Mathis, if I'm not mistaken. It was a giant cabinet-looking thing. No remote control. Okay, well, that's not entirely true. There was a remote control. It was me. My dad would be sitting very comfortable in his lazy boy. Boy, turn it to channel 8. Yeah, okay, Dad. I'd get up and don't turn the dial too fast. If I turn the dial faster than chunk, 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 if I went, brr, man, my dad would lose it. He would get very, very upset. And then, of course, I had to adjust the rabbit ear antenna. It was just constant, right? And so, yes, the TV was awesome, but it was also a hassle. Sometimes I'd stand there holding the antenna until Dad would be satisfied that if I moved away very, very carefully, the picture would stay in good quality. So after all that, another invention really changed things all over again. Not just the transistor, but now comes the integrated circuit. Instead of putting together one transistor at a time, engineers discovered they could place many transistors onto one small piece of silicon, eventually thousands, then millions. Today, there are billions, yes, billions with a B, on the transistors or on these silicon chips, these integrated circuits. Every smartphone, every laptop, every modern car contains computer chips holding billions of microscopic transistors. This completely amazes me. How this was developed, how it's built even to this day, fascinates me. So imagine trying to explain that to someone in, let's say, 1950. They would just look at you like, I don't think you're right in the head. I remember another story from my dad's office. Now I'm thinking about it. one day when I went up to the office, he had something new sitting on his desk. It was a fascinating gadget. It was a Texas Instruments calculator. Today, calculators are practically disposable. I think if you go to some of these office supply stores and you buy enough stuff, they'll give you a calculator that probably does more than what my dad bought. They'll give it to you for free. It's like, hey, here you go, bonus. But in, what was it, like 1972? It was completely, totally different. That calculator, I think that he bought in, I think 1972. If I remember right, he said it cost somewhere like $150, $200. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $1,000 today. It kind of explains why Dad wouldn't let me play with it, right? I wanted to push the buttons. I wanted to do calculations. I don't know. He looked at me like I was trying to borrow his car. But that calculator represented cutting-edge technology. The cheapest smartphone has thousands of times more computing power. Progress. It happens remarkably fast, and it's happening faster and faster every single day. It's like it's exponential. What took us 100 years is being eclipsed every single year. Think about this. Maybe you have a smartwatch. Okay, it contains vastly more computing power than that expensive calculator, more than the first personal computers, even more than the computers NASA used during the Apollo moon missions. We carry history's greatest technology achievements on our wrists, or at very least in our pocket, and complain when the battery only lasts a day. Perspective is kind of interesting, isn't it? Anyway, the integrated circuit paved the way for personal computers in the 70s and the 80s. Then came something that would connect them all together, of course, talking about the internet. And believe it or not, it actually began with a mistake. In the 1960s, these industrial computers are beginning to get smaller. Integrated circuits are changing everything, but there's still a problem. Most computers are completely isolated. Imagine having thousands of telephones that couldn't call one another. That's essentially where computers were at that time. Then the United States Department of Defense asked a very interesting question. What happens if we're attacked? Remember, this is the height of the Cold War. The concern wasn't simply building computers. It was building a communication system with those computers that could survive even if portions of the country were destroyed. They had to think about this. The project became known as ARPANET. And now it may not sound very exciting, but it was the beginning of something that would eventually become the internet. So in 1969, 4 computers were connected together. I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? 4. Okay, so we're going to get to that part where I said it all began with a mistake. Today, there's literally billions of connected devices around the globe, but every journey begins somewhere. And what happened next is, I don't know, I think it's fascinating. The very first message ever sent across this new computer network was supposed to be one word: login. 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 Simple enough. So the operator sat down at the typewriter, the keyboard at UCLA, and typed the letter L. Yeah, everything's going great. Then O. Woohoo, still going. He pressed the G, and the system crashed. So the very first message in internet history was low. Technology has been crashing ever since, but there have been some significant improvements since that time. Has technology ever failed you at exactly the wrong moment? You know, I remember I came into a radio studio where I was doing the morning show, and there was a computer failure, a crash of a major internet system worldwide. And we had no ability to broadcast the morning show. We were there. We had electricity. We had microphones. We had everything was going. But because this computer software server outage happened globally, we had no morning show. And it began me thinking, wow, are we a bit overly reliant on the internet for getting things done? Anyway, ARPANET, as I just discussed, kind of laid the foundation. The internet we use today is really took shape because of another remarkable individual, a British computer scientist named Tim Berners-Lee. In 1989, he was working at CERN, the large physics laboratory in Europe. Scientists from all over the world needed a better way to share research. So Berners-Lee created something called the World Wide Web. That was hyperlinks and web pages and the browsers, basically the architecture that still powers the web today. And here's the part that is just absolutely fascinating. He could have patented the idea. He could have charged licensing fees. He may very well have become one of the most richest people in human history. Instead, he gave it away, free to everyone. Imagine that. One decision made by one individual helped shape nearly everything we now do online. So let's go back to where we started. Your smartphone, sitting there in your hand, probably. How often do we stop and appreciate just how incredible it actually is? I mean, most of it, it's a tool, right? It's just something we use every day. I mean, it's your phone, it's your camera, your calculator, your flashlight, your alarm clock, your calendar, your encyclopedia, your newspaper, your television, your stereo, your GPS, your weather station, your banking system, your shopping mall, your travel agent, your family photo album, your map, your translator, your mailbox, and increasingly, your artificial intelligent assistant. Have you tinkered with AI? Maybe use ChatGPT? Maybe Grok? Maybe Siri? Yeah, you have. Maybe you don't know it, but you have. If someone had shown this device to people living in 1925, they wouldn't have believed it was possible. They probably would have thought it was some kind of weird magic. And here's another interesting thought. There was a time, not very long ago, when the wealthiest universities, major governments, elite scholars had access to large libraries filled with human knowledge. Today, you carry more of that information around in your pocket than the Library of Alexandria ever contained. Think about that. The greatest library of the ancient world would fit comfortably inside your smartphone, and yet somehow we mostly use ours to watch cat videos or TikTok. Okay, so we've talked about electricity, transistors, the computer chips, and it all sounds pretty logical, right? Cause and effect, one thing leads to another. But eventually, science reaches a place where things stop behaving the way our common sense say they should. This is where we wander into the fascinating, and I'll admit, slightly uncomfortable world of quantum mechanics. Okay, don't wig out. This is not going to become the college physics lecture. Honestly, if physicists themselves admit quantum mechanics can be difficult to understand, how am I going to explain it to you? So I'm going to give it, I'll try, okay? Let's keep it simple. Electricity, at its most basic level, is the movement of tiny particles called electrons from one place to another. Imagine, okay, a long tube like a garden hose filled with marbles. If you push one marble into one end, another marble eventually comes out at the other end, right? A reasonably good picture of electricity moving through a wire. Pretty straightforward. But inside the tiny transistors that make up our computer chips, those electrons begin behaving, well, strangely, to put it mildly. Scientists know where these electrons are going to end up. They can calculate the probabilities with astonishing accuracy. But exactly how they behave while they're getting there is a complete different story. One illustration I read, it's kind of like trying to count the blades on a ceiling fan while it is spinning full speed. When the fan stops, of course, you know exactly where each blade is. While it's moving, good luck. It's a little like trying to describe what's happening inside a computer chip. And just when you think things couldn't become any stranger, along comes something called quantum entanglement. Okay, so here's my best understanding and attempt to explain it. Imagine you have two magic coins. You separate them. One stays here, right where you are, and the other one goes to Australia, as far away as you can possibly get, on the other side of the earth. All right? Whenever you flip one coin, the other somehow knows what happened. Not because information has traveled faster than light, but because the two coins remain connected in a way that, honestly, no one completely understands. Now, before those of you who actually know far more about this, before you start sending emails and yelling at me because I'm a simpleton, this is only an illustration. I'm doing the best that I can. It's not exactly how quantum entanglement works, but it's the best I can do to explain something that baffles me. It's close enough to understand why scientists find it so fascinating. And the important point is this: quantum entanglement has been demonstrated in laboratory experiments over and over and over again. Scientists know this is real. They can measure it. They can predict it. That's the key. What they don't understand, though, is why nature behaves this way. I mean, even Albert Einstein knew of this, and he wasn't really keen on this idea. He referred to this as spooky action at a distance. It's a great phrase. Dr. Einstein, can you explain quantum entanglement? Yes, spooky action at a distance. You could quote me on that. But Einstein wasn't joking. He generally found the concept rather unsettling. And if Einstein found something unsettling, I don't feel bad saying that it stretches my imagination too. All of this strange quantum behavior is leading to what many scientists believe will become the next great technological revolution: quantum computing. Today's computers use billions of tiny switches, on, off, yes, no. They're incredibly powerful. Quantum computers, on the other hand, if they reach their full potential, could solve certain problems that would take today's fastest supercomputers thousands or even millions of years in just a very short period of time. We're still in the early stages. I don't think that there's anything that we have that's really fully functional and usable. Of course, it could be, and we just don't know about it. But if history has taught us anything, it's this: never underestimate human ingenuity. If everything we've just talked about makes you a little uncomfortable, you're not alone. Sometimes it does me too, but here's something I remind myself. We use gravity every single day. We know how to launch satellites. We know how to calculate the orbits with extraordinary precision in order to keep them in position. We know about gravity to send spacecraft billions of miles through our solar system and use the gravity of other planets and bodies to, slingshot them further into space. But here's the amazing part. Scientists don't completely understand how gravity actually works either. We know that it does. We know how to use it. We still don't fully understand its nature. Maybe that's a good reminder. Just because we don't completely understand something doesn't mean we can't benefit from it. And just because we can use something doesn't mean we should stop asking thoughtful questions about how it's used. And that's where we're headed in this conversation. Technology has given us some extraordinary blessings, but every powerful tool comes with responsibility. And every generation has had to wrestle with how new technology should fit into our lives. Not everyone has embraced new technology with open arms. In fact, people have been complaining about new technology for literally thousands of years. I have to admit, it kind of makes me feel a little better. Every time I catch myself saying, things aren't the way they used to be, I realize probably people have been saying that since, Adam and Eve got evicted. One of my favorite examples actually comes from ancient Greece. Yes, technology complaints from ancient Greece. There were individuals who thought that writing things down was dangerous for society. Yep. About 2,400 years ago, Socrates believed that writing would actually make people less intelligent. He argued that if people relied on the written word, books, etc., they would stop exercising their memories. Instead of remembering information, they would simply look it up. People would have the appearance of wisdom without actually possessing it. So take that thinking and look at the criticism of technology that we have today. Some people ask if smartphones are causing us to forget phone numbers. Well, the answer to that is yes. There are people that I contact every day because I hit one button on my phone instead of actually punching in the phone number. There are people that are close to me. I'm going to admit something. There are people that are close to me that I don't remember their full phone number. I have to look it up. And it's because I have such easy access to the information. Another complaint is GPS destroying our sense of direction? My sense of direction was never very good anyway. If somebody said, all right, go north and then turn this, and then head east, I mean, I'm like, can you just tell me to turn left at the 7-Eleven or by the big oak tree? Because I don't do that. Some people think that AI is making us stop thinking for ourselves. So it's different technology, but it's the same conversation. Socrates himself never wrote any of his teachings down. So his complaint about writing, dumbing down society, okay. But here's the interesting thing. You know who did write everything down? His student, Plato. Apparently, Plato agreed with Socrates. Oh, writing is terrible. It's going to destroy our society. And yet he simultaneously proved the theory wrong by writing everything down. Human beings have always had a remarkable ability to criticize the very tools that they are using. Some things, I guess, never change. So, I mentioned a little bit ago that I had trouble remembering some phone numbers. When was the last time you memorized a phone number? I mean, and really memorized it. When I grew up, I knew dozens, right? I knew my friends and everything that I needed to know. As a matter of fact, I still know the phone number of the house that I grew up in. But I don't know the phone number of many of the people who are close to me today. It's just one of those things. And look, technology criticism didn't stop there with writing. When automobiles first appeared, people had all kinds of complaints. Some people said, they're too dangerous. Others said that they're never going to replace horses. I mean, come on, horses feed themselves. Cars, you got to put gas in them. Farmers complain that they frighten the livestock. Doctors warn that traveling 30 or 40 miles an hour might actually be harmful to the human body. Today, oh my goodness, if I'm going 40 miles an hour on the highway, I'm going nuts. It's like, please, let's go. People actually worried that automobiles would destroy our natural sense of direction. Today, we say the same thing about GPS. Apparently, every generation believes that the previous generation navigated things better. And then there's my favorite example, the wheel. Okay, now, obviously, we don't have newspaper editorials from 3500 BC that can give us what the critiques were, but I can't help imagining that there had to be someone standing there, arms folded, looking at the very first wagon and saying, my sled worked just fine. Back in my day, we dragged 500-pound grains by hand. Back in my day, we dragged 500 pounds of grain by hand, and we liked it. You think they thought the young people were getting soft because they used a wagon? Human nature, in essence, hasn't really changed. The point is that technology has always been met with excitement and skepticism, and sometimes both are justified. An important part here, though, I want to make is that just because some previous generations worried, let's admit, unnecessarily about the technology, doesn't mean that every concern today is foolish or should just be rejected out of hand. Some are very, very real. And I think we should take them seriously. For example, social media. When our child was growing up, my wife and I talked about limiting screen time. We monitored how much and what they could watch as best we could. And like most parents, we tried to strike a healthy balance. And here's the funny part. Did we regulate our own screen time? No. No, I justified it because, being in the job that I have, I've got to spend a lot of time online doing research. Okay. Justification, the key to everything you've always wanted in life. And sometimes I catch myself picking up my phone, not because I need anything, but simply because it's there. Maybe you've done the same thing. You're standing in line, you got 30 seconds, and instead of waiting and maybe looking around, out comes your phone. We're becoming very uncomfortable with quiet moments. We're uncomfortable being bored. But boredom has historically been where creativity begins. That's probably going to be another show sometime in the future. Some of our best ideas arrive when nothing else is demanding our attention. Probably ought to keep that in mind. Let me ask you, could you go an entire day without looking at your phone? I think about it. I probably could, but I'm thinking, why? Research into social media is pretty interesting. Some research and articles state that social media contributes to anxiety and depression, loneliness, especially among young people. And it doesn't mean that social media in itself is evil. I've reconnected with old friends because of social media. You share pictures, and I've promoted events that I'm at and so forth. So it's a good technology. It's a tool, can be used well. But there are things that you have to be aware of and think about. Privacy, perhaps the lack of it. I think one of the biggest misconceptions today is that our information is private on social media. No, it's not. Every website you go look at, every search you perform, every online purchase, every location your phone, it records. Every app that you install creates information about you. And now companies tell us that much of that information is collected to improve services. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's used for advertising. But it's kind of difficult to know exactly who's collecting what. Something to be aware of. And here's something I've noticed. Technology almost always offers us a trade, convenience in exchange for something else, like online shopping. Yes, extremely convenient, but local stores struggle. GPS, incredibly great, but maybe we don't learn our cities that well. Streaming movies, fantastic. But family members may each end up watching different screens instead of enjoying something together. Cloud storage, very convenient. But now your important documents may exist somewhere you've never seen, on computers owned by someone you've never met. Every advancement solves one problem and sometimes creates another. And that's part of progress. The important thing is recognizing both sides. Okay, we spent a lot of time looking back at the technology and how we got here today. So I'd like to spend the remainder of the time that we have together looking forward. Not because I know what the future holds, I sure don't, but because I believe it's worth asking where today's technology may be taking us. One of the reasons I enjoy following tech companies is that they often reveal where their founders believe humanity is headed. There's a number of fascinating innovators today. One individual in particular seems to have his hand in almost every major technological field, and that's Elon Musk. Now, hang on a second. Before we go any further, let me make something very clear. As we're about to progress, this next portion contains my opinions about where some of these technologies could eventually lead. Reasonable people can certainly disagree, and I'm not presenting prophecy. I'm not presenting any hidden knowledge, right? I'm simply looking at current developments and asking, what might this look like 20 or 30 years from now? And I think these are worthwhile conversations for us to have. So getting back to Musk, when people think about him, sure, you think about Tesla and the electric cars, SpaceX and the rockets, maybe X, the social media platform. But what fascinates me is how many of these companies appear to address different pieces of the same puzzle. Years ago, Elon Musk helped create PayPal. It's the revolutionary digital payment platform. Today, millions of people move money around all over the world without ever touching cash. At the time, it was a huge leap forward. It overcame a lot of banking restrictions. So it was incredibly unique. Then, of course, came Tesla. At first, most people thought Tesla was simply trying to build better electric cars, which he did, significantly better. Today, it's obvious that Tesla has become much more than an automobile company. It's developing AI. It's developing robotics, energy storage, self-driving transportation with the cybercabs. And then, as if that's not enough for to keep him busy, SpaceX. It's an incredible achievement. Reusable rockets, private space flights. Come on. The boosters that land by themselves and that is an amazing thing. He's got plans for the moon. He's got plans for Mars. And then, again, because the poor guy obviously has way too much time on his hand, he needs something else to keep him busy. There's Starlink. Thousands of satellites orbiting the Earth, providing internet service almost everywhere on the planet. And then again, there's another company. Perhaps you've heard of this one, Neuralink. It could be the most controversial of all of his projects. It's a tiny computer interface designed to connect directly with the human brain. It's implanted in the brain. When you step back, you begin seeing something very interesting with all of these. These are not isolated technologies. They have the potential to work together. And before I get into the concerns that I have, I think it's only fair that we first acknowledge something very important. These technologies have tremendous potential to improve people's lives. Take the self-driving cars. Whenever I mention autonomous cars, usually someone says, I'm not going to ride in one. No, I would. But think about someone who's, let's say, 85 years old, whose eyesight has failed. They've lost the ability to drive. Now imagine a safe, reliable vehicle that allows them to visit family, go to church, go shopping, attend doctor's appointments, all without depending on someone else. That's a wonderful possibility. Or consider somebody with a spinal cord injury, okay? This is one of Neuralink's main goals. It's not creating superhuman intelligence. No, its goal is very much more simple and important. It's helping someone move a computer cursor to type, to communicate, or perhaps even one day regain movement that they had permanently lost. That is extraordinary. Imagine telling someone confined to a wheelchair that one day they may regain independence because of a tiny device no larger than a small coin. That is worth celebrating. Starlink, right? The satellite communications system. There are still communities around the world and even here in America where reliable internet supply it's just not available. Students struggle, businesses struggle, hospitals struggle. Satellite internet could genuinely improve lives. These are very real benefits, very real. But here's something I'd like you to think about. If someone offered you a medical technology that could restore your eyesight, would you accept it? Probably. I'd be very interested. What if it restored your hearing? Yes. What if it allowed someone paralyzed to walk? Sure. Those become much more difficult questions to dismiss. Technology often arrives because it solves a genuine human problem. And that's why these conversations deserve very careful thought. So here's where my concerns begin to emerge. Not because I believe these technologies are inherently evil. Look, Musk is not a Bond villain, okay? He's not even, an ill-tempered Dr. Doofenshmirtz. I just believe he's trying to do what he thinks is best, okay? Technology isn't in and of itself evil, okay? A hammer can build a home, or a hammer can be a weapon. If the hammer isn't the problem, the person holding it is. History's taught us something very important. Nearly every major technological advancement has eventually been used for purposes its inventors did not intend. Alfred Nobel invented dynamite primarily for construction and mining. It was also used in warfare, obviously. The Wright brothers wanted to fly, and within a decade, airplanes were being used in combat. Nuclear physics gave us power plants and nuclear weapons. The internet connected the world and gave criminals an entirely new way to steal information and other things. Technology itself is morally neutral. Human beings, we are not. What happens if all of these technologies eventually become interconnected? So think a few years into the future, okay? Your internet connection comes primarily from satellites. Your transportation depends on artificial intelligence and GPS guidance from the satellites. Your banking is entirely digital. Your identification exists electronically. Your healthcare records are all online. Your home is connected. The security system, the utilities, the air conditioning, your car is even connected. Perhaps one day, medical devices inside our own bodies will be connected. And again, I'm not saying that in and of itself is good or bad. I'm simply observing that we continue moving toward greater connectivity and obviously greater convenience. But greater convenience also creates greater dependence. And that's the part I think we are overlooking. Think about your own life. How many of you still balance your checkbook by hand? Do you pay your bills online? Do you store family photos in the cloud? Do you keep tax records digitally? Do you access bank accounts from your phone? Do you use digital boarding passes at the airport? Do you order your groceries online? Most of us do, including me. I'm not standing outside this conversation throwing rocks, okay? I'm standing right in the middle of it with you. I enjoy technology. I use technology. I benefit from it every single day. That's exactly why I think we should occasionally stop and think carefully about where it's taking us. Convenience has quietly become one of the highest values in our modern life. We don't just appreciate convenience, we expect it. And once we've experienced convenience, it is very difficult to give it up. I don't believe the real issue is technology. I believe the real issue has always been the human heart. And I think that's where Scripture gives us some very incredible, useful wisdom. I think Scripture clearly tells us that human creativity is one of God's gifts. When it's used wisely, it improves lives. It relieves suffering. It helps people flourish. I believe God gave mankind curious minds for a reason. I think this is part of what Scripture says, that we are made in God's image. Curiosity, creativity, imagination. I mean, from the very beginning of Genesis, God instructed humanity to cultivate creation, to discover, to build, to create. We have science and technology, and when that is guided by wisdom, it's all part of the calling, I truly believe. Here's where I think we sometimes get into a bit of trouble. We begin believing that technology itself can solve the deepest problems of humanity. I truly believe that Elon Musk and others like him are in this camp, that they believe that through their intelligence, their creativity, their ingenuity, they can solve the problems that face humanity. They cannot. We cannot solve these problems. Never have been able to, and we never will. Yes, technology can cure disease. It cannot cure greed. Technology can connect people. It cannot create love. Technology can give us vast amounts of information, but it cannot give us wisdom. Technology can entertain us, but it cannot give our lives meaning. Technology can extend life. It cannot and will not ever defeat death. When you look back through human history, you notice something interesting. Every generation has invented more powerful tools, but human nature hasn't changed very much. People still struggle with pride and jealousy and anger and hatred and selfishness and fear. Those problems existed long before electricity, long before cars, long before computers and AI and all of the other technology. Tech did not create these problems. It simply gave us new ways to express them. The internet didn't invent dishonesty. It just allowed dishonest people to reach more victims. Social media did not invent pride. It gave pride another platform. AI didn't and will not invent evil, but it could allow it to flourish in a greater form. Robotics, quantum computers, whatever comes after that, none of this is what our human heart is all about. Here's something worth thinking about. If we could invent the perfect society, remove every disease, every accident, and inconvenience, would people suddenly become kind? Would they become forgiving? Would they become generous? History suggests no. Look, this is something that maybe a little bit later on we'll tackle some political questions that are happening. You know, the difference between capitalism and socialism and all the other isms. But you can't create a perfect society because we are not perfect. We are broken, sinful people. You can't cure everything. One of my concerns moving forward isn't that technology will become more powerful. It absolutely will. I'm convinced we're only scratching the surface of what's to come. Artificial intelligence will improve. Robotics will improve. Medical science, transportation, computers are all going to become better. Quantum computing will likely become a reality. We'll probably look back 20 years from now and laugh at how primitive today's technology seems. Just kind of like we laugh at dial-up internet today. Now, my concern isn't technological process. It's whether our character will mature as quickly as our inventions. Power without wisdom has always been dangerous, whether we're talking about governments, corporations, individuals. Freedom requires responsibility, and it always has, and it always will. I don't want us to end our time together by you being discouraged. Actually, I hope you leave encouraged. Despite all the remarkable changes around us, the most important truths have not changed at all. God hasn't changed. God never will change. Truth hasn't changed. Love hasn't changed. The gospel hasn't changed. The true gospel has not changed. Human beings still long for hope and purpose and forgiveness and peace and relationships with our Creator, God. No computer, no technology is ever going to replace that. No algorithm is going to manufacture it. No AI intelligence can experience it on our behalf. These are gifts that come only from God. One of my favorite passages of Scripture comes from the book of James. James writes, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you." Notice what James doesn't say. He doesn't say, if any of you lacks information. Today, information is everywhere. Wisdom is much harder to find. And wisdom is exactly what we need as we navigate this remarkable technological age. So here's a final thought. I'd like to leave you with this. When people landed on the moon, the technology was extraordinary. But what inspired the world wasn't the computer. It was the courage. When doctors perform a life-saving surgery, the machines are amazing. But what moves us is the compassion. When a missionary uses the internet to share the gospel halfway around the world, the satellites are remarkable, but it's the message that changes lives. Technology is just the amplifier. It amplifies whatever already exists in the human heart. It's the heart that is filled with kindness. Technology spreads that kindness. If the heart is filled with hatred, technology is going to spread the hatred. If the amplifier isn't the issue, the source is. So, is technology making our lives better? In many ways, absolutely. Should we continue exploring, discovering, inventing, and creating? Absolutely, yes, I believe so. But let's never confuse the gifts with the giver, God Himself. Let's enjoy these incredible tools. Let's use them wisely. Let's teach our children to use them responsibly. And let's remain aware of both their tremendous blessing and the very real dangers and challenges. Above all, let's ask God for the wisdom to know the difference. I've appreciated our time together, and I very much look forward to our next conversation. If you have questions or comments regarding today's show, or perhaps you'd like to suggest a topic for us to explore in a future program, please email me at sethmilamedia@gmail.com. That's sethmilamedia@gmail.com. This program was sponsored in part by Audio Imaging Solutions, LLC. Your message professionally crafted and delivered. For professional voice work, go to audioimigingsolutions.com. That's audioimigingsolutions.com.